Welcome to the Light Reading Podcast. I'm Phil Harvey. I'm an editor at Light Reading, and I'm joined on this podcast by my colleague Mike Dano, and we talk about all of the recent Microsoft acquisitions, what they might mean for Microsoft's cloud business, and what it seems like their whole strategy is as they're rolling up all these telecom-focused network functions and putting them in the cloud. You'll hear about Mike's reporting, what we think is going to happen next, and maybe what it means for service providers as well, right after this break. Hi, welcome to the program. I'm Phil Harvey, and I'm joined today by Mike Dano, one of my Light Reading colleagues. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
Great to have you on today. We're doing a podcast. We're also recording it on video. So if I accidentally lose my mind and refer to something that I'm doing as opposed to something that I'm saying, the people listening to the audio won't be too terribly thrown off.
So I should leave the beer. I should leave all the beer and stuff on the outside of the frame.
You can still do it. You just have to make the loud sipping noise so everybody knows it's
that
a beer.
I can do.
Yeah. It's we got to play to the audio and the video. But what we're really here to do is actually just do a bit of catch up on Microsoft, because you've written a few pieces about them lately. One of the more well-trafficked pieces on our site was you writing about Microsoft's cloud and edge and 5G strategy sort of coming together or becoming more obvious. And in addition to what fueled that piece, which we'll get into in a second, they've also made some acquisitions recently. The most recent of which was Metaswitch Networks. Full disclosure, I used to work at Metaswitch Networks.
What? Shocker.
I joined the company in 2013, stayed there for a couple of years, 2.5 years. Yeah. And I was in the communications department. So I'm not an engineer. I was director of communications. I was basically just spell checking press releases and trying not to make any mistakes on the website. But in the process of working there, I did get to become familiar with how deeply technical and talented their bench of software engineers is. And I think maybe that Microsoft has might have recognized that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about,
Yeah, and here I'm just gonna sit back and let you tell us what's going on, because I was going to say, I'm from the outside looking in here.
Between the two of us, between Metaswitch and Affirmed, let's just start listing all the things that Microsoft now has that are like cloud-based telecom functions.
Yeah, networking. A lot of the insight that I feel like I have gotten into Microsoft's ambitions actually came from haphazardly stumbling onto its product page for Azure Edge zones. Right. So they announced Azure Edge zones, I think either earlier this year or late last year. And then they made that a purchase of Affirmed, and it all felt very sort of squishy and, software virtualization, future of 5G. Like, that's as much as information as they would give in a lot of the press releases. But man, I found that web page, and it was the product web page for that. And it basically just laid out, if you're an operator, we want to sell you this. If you're a private enterprise that wants to build its own private wireless network, we'll sell you this. If you're interested in edge computing, here's some of our plans for that. They're all related. And it was all on one sort of minor product web page, but I felt like that was the thing for me that was this is all related. And they've got a strategy that they're pursuing. And so as soon as that acquisition of Metaswitch came out, it's not only are they interested in all these things, but they're going to invest in the super smart people that work at Metaswitch, who literally everyone has said, there's some crazy smart engineers over there, and they
Yeah.
know networking. Like they know networking, hardcore, deep networking. Like
Mhm.
as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, they really are serious. Like this
Yeah.
acquisition is not a fluffy, fancy virtualized software. These are people who do, like you said, like VoIP codecs and like
Right.
crazy deep networking, so boring stuff that
Yeah. The
only a
the most
Microsoft person would appreciate.
the most in the weeds networking protocols
Oh,
anyone's ever conceived of. But I mean,
so
and weirdly enough, so I mean, just going by ticking off the boxes, they've now got a 5G core that's virtualized and in the cloud. They've got a telecom application server, which allows for any amount of telecommunications functions involving voice to be uh, housed, hosted, and disseminated via the cloud. They've got let's see, and I don't know that they would even use this, but they've got a complete end-to-end UCaaS suite that's all cloud native. So, client software and all that. Now, Microsoft is doing well with all the stuff that it has, but it also, could use more people to, innovate and come up with things and maybe just solve problems around it. You add it all together, and it's easy to kind of knee jerk and go like, oh, okay, they're going to build blank or they're going to build blank. But I think what you were saying with Azure Edge is edge zones is that really they're setting up the business to be the cloud just powers all communications and utility computing needs for any kind of company.
right. And I think it's that last part that is the most interesting one to me for any kind of company. So, you
Yeah.
know, you know, I've seen people say like no one really wants to be in the business of supplying equipment to telecom companies. Like that is a difficult business. You see it, Nokia and Ericsson,
Right.
Huawei. We've seen Motorola and Lucent, and Nortel have a lot of trouble in selling services to network operators. But
Yeah.
I don't think that's what this is. I think that this is, they might sell some services to an AT&T or whatever, but what they're
Mhm.
really seeing is like we can sell these networking services to all of our big enterprise customers, a FedEx or a UPS or a school district or a Blue Jean, or not a Blue Jeans necessarily, that's purchased by Verizon, but like
Right.
a WebEx, or like whoever needs these networking things, um, could buy it from Microsoft and could buy a lot of the full stack directly
Right.
from Microsoft. On that Azure webpage that I was talking about, like they listed all the partners that they're working with. You can buy
Mhm.
services from Vodafone. You can buy connectivity from Vodafone. You can buy connectivity from AT&T. You can buy the physical hardware from CommScope. You can
Hmm.
buy, and the two of the partners that they listed were Affirmed and Metaswitch, and those are two companies that they now own. So
Yeah.
like they're getting deeper into owning that, not just partnering with people to provide it, but just providing it themselves.
I think they may have also seen the value in having those, essentially those network functions become part of the Azure cloud, like completely integrated, as opposed to
Totally
being
integrated.
something that they have to plug into from the outside. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention session border controllers and media gateways and those type of
Yeah.
functions are also things that Metaswitch had successfully built. Oh, IMS cores as well.
Right.
They built all these things into the cloud. They were all cloud native network functions, but unfortunately for Metaswitch, they were never one or two in any of those spaces. They were a perennial uh, fourth or fifth place in almost every product category they competed in because of the size of the company. But technically, they always got high marks. They always got great marks for customer service. They always got great marks for their technical aptitude and how well they built the products and how thoughtful they were about how it was engineered and how sophisticated and how resilient they were, that sort of thing. I think maybe Microsoft sort of saw that as like, here's a bunch of things we can integrate into the cloud, saving us time and money. And then when we go to sell to, be it an enterprise or be it a telco or be it any other kind of business, they can use whatever they need in that stack and
Yeah.
point it back to Azure Cloud, which I think is that's the big story. Is this just simply superpowers the 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 Microsoft Cloud to provide not just all the stuff it was already providing, all the Office suite, all the storage, all those things, but in addition, that utility computing, utility communications. One of the I forget which analyst said this in your story. To think of 5G itself as just an app that runs on the cloud.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, like I think that that's where this is all headed. And
yeah.
so, really the end point of that discussion was, well, what do you think is a carrier? Like, who do you think of
Mm,
as buying, you're buying service from?
right.
And that I think that that is becoming a very interesting question, because here's Microsoft that's got all the cloud, and now they've got all this like weird networking stuff. And if you want to build your own network, well, you can use one of their partners like CommScope, and you'd have to do some network design and that kind of stuff. But like,
Yeah.
if you're just going to buy the connectivity portion, that's a very small part of this overall thing, that most of which are going to be buying from Microsoft. So, in the mind of one of their big enterprise customers, if it's like McDonald's or something, like, are
Yeah.
they really thinking that my telecom company is AT&T, or is it really like Microsoft? Like, am I getting
Yeah.
most of my telecommunications equipment and services from Microsoft? And I think that is very interesting. It's like we had all these dumb pipe conversations 10 years ago, and I think
Right.
we may have more of them in the future.
I think this is definitely and I'm not sure which direction to take that conversation, but this is definitely a warning to the telco, the traditional telecom infrastructure service providers to say, like, hey, if Microsoft can not only sell you cloud services, but can also spin up a 5G core, and do all the communications protocols on top of that and complete calls on a 5G network and terminate from here to here and, use their cloud and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
What are they really buying from you, service
Yeah.
provider?
What do you? Yeah. And again, I'm reluctant to go down that dumb pipe conversation, because
Yeah.
I think that the people who work at AT&T and Verizon and stuff, they're smart. Like, they know, and I think they definitely have a trump card in terms of the routing of that traffic. That's a topic that I've come across in talking about edge computing, and they really do have like an advantage in that
Yeah.
area, in terms of, if I don't route it to this location, you're just not going to get it. Like, you're just not going to get that low latency or whatever it is. I hold that card, and I can do with it what I want. So I think, there's certainly things that there's certainly elements of that discussion that become complex, and I think those Metaswitch guys, probably the people who work at that company, are going to be able to help Microsoft figure out a lot more of those kinds of deep networking issues, in the months and years to come.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a scale thing too, not just a scale up, but a scale down thing. Microsoft is also, uh, selling uh, cloud-based stuff to businesses of any size, and that's another area where a lot of Metaswitch's customers were tier three, tier two, tier three rural carriers, those sorts of things, and a lot of what they gave to those carriers was simply you know, UCAS services delivered via, their 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 existing telephone infrastructure.
Yeah.
So that's maybe another avenue where Microsoft can use its standing and its reach in the market to sell all manners of service to enterprises and carriers of all, pretty much of all sizes.
And that's one of the things, like that. There's a lot of parts that I am very interested in, but there's a lot of other parts of this that I totally don't get. And one of them is how broad is Microsoft going to reach with this thing? Is this
Right.
only for the U.S.? Because like you pointed out, is that Metaswitch, a lot of their customers are some of the tier 2 and tier 3 network operators in the U.S. A good 2/3 of their business is in North America. So
Mm-hmm.
Is Microsoft like? Is it only in the U.S.? Is this an international play? I'm not real clear on what the scale of it is.
Yeah, that remains to be seen. It also remains to be seen, like how they how besides Azure edge zones, how exactly they go to market with some of this stuff, or does some of this stuff just become capabilities that they fold into, their existing product set, just things that they can provide if you ask for them, but they're not necessarily the premium product or what have
Right.
you.
Yeah.
Because that's I think a good place to leave it, because there's still so much unknown about what Microsoft ends up doing with this in the market. But this certainly gives them the expertise and the capabilities to make their approach to the cloud a lot more far-reaching than it was just a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
All right, Mike Dano, thank you very much for joining
Hey,
us.
thank you. Appreciate it.
That is it. That's our show. I want to thank Mike Dano for his time and his diligent reporting on the subject of all things Microsoft and the cloud, and 5G and all the other stuff he does. I want to thank Tien Fu, our producer, for making us sound so good even when we don't. And I want to thank you, dear listener, because if you weren't paying attention, we wouldn't get away with doing all of this at work. Please stay safe. Please tell a friend to subscribe to the Light Reading Podcast, and we will see you next time.